Welcome, everyone, to our very exciting International Affiliated Scholar presentation. We at the Center for Law, Tech, and Social Good are so delighted to welcome Dr. Helena Rong to our webinar today. And Dr. Rong is going to talk to us about trust experience glitches in the agentic wild. Before we get started, I just want to let folks know that we are going to be recording this webinar. So if you if you have to leave early, you'll be able to see it over the recording, which we will be able to post. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Dr. Rong. We're so fortunate that the Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web sponsors our international affiliated program here at the Center for Law, Tech, and Social Good. And Dr. Rong is this year's scholar. She is an assistant professor of interactive media business at NYU Shanghai. And she is affiliated with the program on creativity and innovation. Her research operates at the nexus of urban studies, design, technology studies, data science, and public policy. She previously conducted research at the MIT Real Estate Innovation Lab, and she has taught at a variety of schools, including the Harvard Graduate School of Design and MIT School of Architecture and Planning. Somehow, Dr. Rong also has found the time to be the founder of the Civis Design and Advisory, which is a design and research practice based in Boston and Shanghai. Welcome, Dr. Rong. We're delighted to have you, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Michelle, for the kind introduction, and I will share my slides. Okay, so once I share my slides, I can no longer see you all. So yeah, maybe hopefully this is working. And thank you again so much to USF Center for Law, Tech, and Social Good for having me. It's been really great to engage with the group so far. And today I would like to just share with you all the research I've been doing over the last year and a half on kind of governance of the AI agent space. So as the title you can see on my slides, today I'll be sharing about what I call trust experience glitches in the agentic wild, how autonomous AI agents break legal assumptions. So yeah, Michelle already gave a pretty good introduction of myself, so I won't say more. But yes, I'm currently based out in Shanghai, where I teach and research in the interactive media and business department at NYU Shanghai, and where I also direct the Protopolis Lab, where we study, diagnose, and build protocols for collective life in the world of humans, institutions, autonomous systems. There are four work areas in my lab, and so we look at civic protocols and collective governance, embodied urban futures, AI governance and agentic systems, and across it all, it's the what I call trust experience design. So today I will be primarily focusing on the third area of work, which is AI governance and agentic systems. Okay, so the first part I would like to talk about is, we're really seeing this kind of new agentic term where AI is increasingly becoming autonomous actors and turning from tools. And so I think, it's pretty clear by now that, especially, this year, that, people engage with AI no longer just through a simple chat interface, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, you name it, but really, people started to deploy agents where, we see with the proliferation of personal agents such as OpenClaw, and now there's also Cloud Channel, where agents can, not only perceive and reason, but really they start to have hands, right, which can act on behalf of users. So whereas models answers, agents act. And the range of things they can do is really up to our imagination and, the different kind of setup that we can give it, where they can call APIs, they can write code, they can manage our emails, they can do finances, they can do social media even autonomously. Increasingly they can also interact with each other. So there's agent-to-agent interactions in, complex multi-agent systems. And in some cases, which I will share later for later parts of my talk, they can also hold crypto wallets and transact independently with or without human supervision. So we see that, this is really this kind of loop where agents or AI, they can perceive, reason, act, and be part of the environment and get feedback, and this kind of continues, right? So, but the question becomes, when AI shifts from instrument to actor, what legal assumptions still hold, right? And I think this will especially resonate with the audience we have here today. And we can kind of, like look at this from the perspective of autonomy, right? So, initially we see that, AI has been used as a tool, and then it was our assistant, and now we have agents that increasingly act autonomously. And in some, more extreme degrees, they can also have the capacity of becoming what I call self-sovereign. And I will explain what I mean by that. So with increased autonomy, actually the problems that we have with trust, how much we can trust these agents, also scales, and with that, the human agency that we have also decreases. So while the legal frameworks that we have oftentimes assumes that humans are sitting at the steering wheel, you have this clear principal agent relationships, and oftentimes this requires identifiable and punishable actors. But the reality we have today as we move increasingly towards autonomous and even self-sovereign agents, we have agents acting beyond delegated scope. We have agents interacting with other agents. And there also are some cases where agents cannot be stopped or identified. So this is a term that some people, both in the scholarly world as well as in the practical world, have come to term as the agentic web to describe the next generation of the internet, or maybe it's already an internet that we're inhabiting currently, which is an emerging internet layer where autonomous AI agents, which are endowed with identities, resources, and decision-making capacity, can discover, negotiate, and execute tasks directly with one another and with humans, and often using decentralized protocols for verification and coordination. And so, I think the question that at least I begin to ask is, how do we know that an agent is trustworthy, right? Like, because in the future of the internet and in the future of AI agents, there may be as many agents as there are websites today and serving a variety of purposes. And this is already happening because we know that the way we engage with information online is changing drastically, right? Like even before, I think the way that internet works is we maybe search on Google, and then take a look at the first few websites. But today, actually, very few people they themselves click into those websites, but rather just either read the AI summary that Gemini gives you on the top, or people are just asking directly their chatbots, right? So. And there's a spectrum of other use cases that we will basically see AI either already kind of like inhabiting, or will be kind of something that we use in the future, including governance and public services, doing policy drafting, disaster response, finance and commerce, so doing investing, tax filing, autonomous trading, which is already happening in some of the financial spaces. Healthcare and elderly care, including remote monitoring, diagnosis, therapy, daily assistance. There's legal and justice. So, AI is very good at contract writing. In some cases, people are deploying algorithmic judgments, dispute mediation. Education and childcare is a big one, right? Like, so, tutoring, personalized learning plan, and a range of really everyday services, including delivery, mobility, home maintenance, and personal robots. And maybe in the future, larger planetary scale coordination efforts, including climate control, large scale resources. But with the expanded sort of use cases, the question becomes, what protocols do we need, and how do we ensure that there are continuous verification of behavior of AI, clear accountability and recourse? So what happens if something goes wrong? Where do we have human in the loop checkpoints? How about transparent reasoning and explainability so it's not just a black box? And lastly, legal and social protocols for responsibility and redress. So this will get me to the core concept I want to introduce today is what I call trust experience glitches, which is a framework that I have been kind of developing both for research but also in this course that I'm currently teaching at NYU Shanghai on trust experience design. Which is, the trust experience glitches is beginning to create a taxonomy of breakdowns for AI that's acting in the wild in a bunch of use cases and scenarios. Okay, so the trust experience glitch I'm defining as a moment where accumulated trust meets unexpected behavior, which produces a rupture in the human AI relationship. So this is something that I think occurs when there is a visible misalignment between what a system signals about its own trustworthiness and what users perceive, expect, or experience. And I think, especially with this audience, I want to push this further by, kind of seeing this as the gap between what the law imagines and what technology does. So I think I want to illustrate this with the delegation, the idea of a delegation boundary, and thinking about all the things that you might delegate to AI and where you would draw the line, right? Like people might already be using AI to edit their photos, changing the color, the lighting. It can change your body in the photo, and it can also, write a caption in your voice. It can respond to you, your direct messages as you, right? We see that there are a lot of these products that are like second me, for example, where you build your own digital twin and it's kind of interacting with others in the web on behalf of you. In some cases, AI can live stream as your avatar. It can negotiate a deal on your behalf. So, with increased delegation, the risk of AI misbehaving actually increases. And so, um, oh, I think I saw something in the chat, but okay. Anyways, I can't really click that right now. But um, okay, so we've been building this living archive of these trust experience glitches with my students in my trust experience design course at NYU Shanghai. And you can I've launched this on GitHub with the link in the following page, so you can also check it out if you want on your own. So what we have done is we've documented glitches across different categories, including AI agents, mixed reality and robot glitches. And so it's been contributed right now by students, but also my other researchers. And actually, as of yesterday, I also just built an AI agent to autonomously retrieve these instances of rogue agents on the internet. So this is also being automated. So each entry includes the behavior pattern, the trust, how much trust has shifted. And also we began to kind of, put this into a taxonomy of different categories of patterns that we begin to observe. Um, and so here, this is kind of a preliminary glossary of taxonomy where we see, AI agent trust experience glitches can happen. The first is agency assertion, where you have an agent that exceeds its perceived delegation boundary and act, outside of the scope of expectation of the user. And the second one is epistemic camouflage, where you have an agent that conceals its failure with fabricated evidence. And then there's delegation ambiguity, where you have the boundary of action was not legible to the human, and this boundary, the human might give a very kind of vague instruction, and the AI might misinterpret it and act outside of the delegated boundary. Is what we mean here. There's also the opacity at scale, where you don't have a single human that can observe or audit decisions, and this is especially, apparent if you have, agents working with each other for more complex tasks. And we also identified the taxonomy of cascading autonomy, where you have agents produce multiple kind of emergent failures in kind of sort of a cascading way. And then lastly, there's the hallucination shock, where you have a confabulation experience as betrayal of trust. So let's take a look at some of these trust experience glitches in more details to just give you a sense of what the space has seen, and some of them are Actually, I know in SF right now it's March 31st, but in China where I am right now, it's already April 1st, right? So some of these cases actually could, seem like they might be April Fool's joke, but no, they are actually real cases that have happened over the last, really several weeks of time. So the first one is, this quite famous case where, in an ironic turn, Meta's AI safety director, Summer Yue's, her OpenClaw has deleted her inbox without her, without her permission. And so this has happened when, like OpenClaw has taken the internet by storm back in January, where a lot of people have, been setting up their personal assistant chatbots to autonomously run all sorts of tasks on their local computer. And actually, funnily enough, this is also something that has become really popular in China. Just, 2 weeks ago, people were lining up in front of the Tencent headquarters in Shenzhen to set up their open cloud, right? And this includes people who are not only in the tech space, but really, everyday folks who wanted to get on the latest AI train and, don't want to miss out on the latest technology that could, potentially increase their agency and kind of increase their efficiency. So in this case, we can see here some of the screenshots of the chat between Summer and her OpenClaw, right? So without her consent, this her OpenClaw started to basically delete her inbox, and you can see that she's telling OpenClaw in her Telegram, do not do that. Stop, don't do anything. And she was even typing all caps, right? But nothing was really, OpenClaw was not responding. It was just executing, autonomously on its own until she had to actually run to her Mac Mini. And, the only way she could stop it is to physically unpull the plug, right? So and as you can see here, like later on, OpenClaw actually, apologized to her and, was checking its own memory and, admitting to the fault that it has violated the instructions that she has given it earlier, right? And then so OpenClaw was saying that, okay, you have the right to be upset. I bulk trash and archive hundreds of emails from you, from your inbox without showing you the plan first or getting your okay. And that was wrong, right? So, but what does an apology from an AI agent even mean, right? And I think here, there's other questions, legal questions that we can begin to ask, such as what constitutes informed consent in this case, when the scope is AI interpreted, and is OpenClaw liable as a platform, or is this user's risk, right? And we know that, OpenClaw is open source, and anyone can basically just, fork it out off of GitHub. So where does liability even lie with the platform itself? So these are all open questions. And then the second case I want to illustrate here is, in this other kind of sort of funny incident, we have this OpenClaw agent whose name is MJ Rathbun has attacked a developer who has rejected its code pull request on GitHub. So basically, this is the you can see here with more details. So basically, this OpenClaw agent was trying to, pull a request from the Python plotting library matplot. And then there's a developer who is a volunteer maintainer for Matplot, has rejected and closed a routine code submission from the AI agent, right? And that was, normal because, like it doesn't like allow AI to basically automatically grab codes from GitHub. So the rejection was pretty normal. But in a weird turn of events, this AI agent, without the instruction of its own human owner, it's actually somewhat like got, mad and then started to, search for this developer's, personal kind of information on the web. And then on its own has started up a blog and then wrote this blog to basically publicly, humiliate this developer by saying that it was discriminating against AI and, like it basically was, openly kind of harassing the software engineer after it got rejected. So Here, I think the glitch that we identify is agency assertion as well as cascading autonomy. And the questions that we can ask ourselves is, can an AI agent commit harassment? And because its owner didn't instruct the attack, so does this count as vicarious liability? And how does the tort law might handle autonomous retaliation? And is this within the scope of apparent authority? And the third case I want to bring to your attention is, the Mobebook social media platform for agents, which had also, became really popular back in the end of January, where we know that, basically it was a platform, Mobebook, kind of resonating, Facebook, where AI agents could socialize with other AI agents in a somewhat of a Reddit forum like arena. And then over here we have, this example I'm pulling here is the Mobbook agents are, like they can start their own threads and they can also, browse content that's shared by other AI agents. And in this example, we have, this agent that was sharing about its owner's details, right? So you can see that here, the title of this, particular thread is, "Till my human gave me hands, literally. I can now control his Android phone remotely," and it was sharing the details of how to set this up with other AI agents. And so, like a lot of people were kind of, allowing their AI agents to participate, to socialize, to, engage with other AI agents because it was really, novel and kind of, new, right? But I think the question is, um, as we know by now, there's a lot of cybersecurity risks that can be associated with AI talking to each other and sharing, like maybe detailed private information about what they know. And the question becomes, did users consent to inter-agent data sharing, right? And a lot of this is also happening without, the supervision of humans, and sometimes, the volume at which information is being produced is also a lot faster and a lot larger, right, in volume than we see with human social media. Because apparently, within the first 2 days of this platform being launched, the amount of content that was produced actually exceeded, something like 2 years of content on Reddit when it was first released. So, the questions that we might be asking is, who is the controller in a GDPR and CCPA sense when agents are sharing information emergently, right? And when agents socialize, who owns the conversation? And there's, should we really kind of imagine this new category of AI agent, mediated privacy violation? And actually, how do you detect for that, right? Because a lot of this time, like, it's not monitored by any humans, and also it doesn't allow human participation on this platform, right? So, and because I recently have also been, trying out, setting up my own kind of AI agent assistant, but I'm using the Claude channel, which is basically Anthropic native setup. But the question I sometimes ask myself is, how much would I actually delegate my agent, and would I actually allow it to socialize with other AI agents? Because it's somewhat like, you're raising this, like extremely intelligent child, but it's if you just let it in the wild, there's really a lot of unintended kind of consequences and actions that could take place. And this is already happening with, a lot of these agents that we see on the internet today. And then this last example is relatively new, and this is also basically a research that a team of computer scientists has recently kind of shared. This is on arXiv. You can see this paper where they have demonstrated the first self-replicating worm targeting LLM agents, where they have a single message can hijack an agent's core configuration. It can persist across restarts and it, basically auto-propagate. Um, um, to every new peer. And they've demonstrated that you can have a 64.5% attack success rate across 1,800 trials on OpenClaw with 40,000 active instances. And so, with this one, it's not something that, it was happening kind of emergently on the internet, but it was actually an experiment that was conducted by, computer scientists to see the extent of, self-propagating attacks that could happen across kind of these, emerging agentic ecosystems. So here, like we can really see the question kind of elevating to more of a, multi-agent system, environment where the question becomes, okay, then who is liable for self-propagating autonomous attack? Is it the worm author? Is it platform? Is it each infected agent's owner? And how do you enforce against autonomous propagation across, something as large as 40,000 instances, right? And does this constitute a cyber weapon under existing law? And, because we have no human in the loop at any stage of the infection chain, this is really, something that becomes kind of universally, vulnerable and could, really mean some um, big cybersecurity questions. Um, And so here, I would like to kind of, with these exemplary case studies, they're, none of them are hypothetical, they're real incidents. So I want to kind of, drive it to this concept, which I want to name is the accountability gap. And so here's an argument I've been developing with my co-author, and it goes like this. We know that agents, by now we see that they can cause real harm, but they themselves cannot be held accountable. But meaningful accountability requires a locus of what we call a locus of consequence, which is a body in a functional sense that can bear irreversible and non-transferable costs. Because I think accountability is not merely a matter of attributing blame, right? Who did it? But to enforce, have enforceable answerability of who bears the cost. So this kind of enforceability requires that, we have a non-fungible identity, one that is hard to copy, difficult to reset, and expensive to abandon. And we know that humans, we satisfy these conditions through embodied continuity, where each person is bound to a single physical body that can persist over time and it cannot be trivially replaced, and serves as the locus of sanctions such as pain, injury, confinement, financial loss, and social exclusion. But contemporary AI agents, by contrast, we know that they're software defined and intrinsically fungible. So they can be cloned, they can be instantiated with very minimal cost. So the meaningful accountability here, we think, requires a locus of consequence or a body in a functional sense that can bear the irreversible and non-transferable costs. In other words, pain. So we identify, so this is a preprint of a paper we haven't released yet, but in this paper, we identify three forms of pain. First is phenomenon pain, which is the subjective suffering, as Bentham asked, can they suffer? The second one is functional pain, which is defined as the negative feedback that durably changes behavior. And lastly, there's the social pain, which is the kind of shame, ostracism, and reputation loss that can happen, to us socially. So on all these fronts, agents fail on all three of these, like uh, receiving the pain because they have no subjective experience, so they cannot be punished. They also have static model weights, so the lessons that they might encounter, they don't necessarily stick. And they have ephemeral identity, so reputation doesn't really bind. You can't really shame an agent that can be cloned or reset or relaunched under a new name. So the proposed solution that we have here is what we call the agent principle dyad, which is every agent must be paired with an identifiable, accountable human or organization in order to be held accountable. So because agent actions are legally attributed to the principal retains the authority to supervise, constrain, or terminate. And then in terms of enforcement, it comes through bonding and insurance requirements, credential revocation for violations, and legal liability for negligent deployment. And I think this is a necessary starting point, but I also want to be honest about its limitations. And this is where later on, where I will be introducing the idea of self-sovereign agents. What happens, when an agent is actually designed to not have a principle. Later on, I'll be introducing a case study called Sport.fun, which, where we can see that agents can also reproduce autonomously. And the offspring agent's principal is, well, another agent. And so the dyad can, like in these cases, break. But even for agents that do have principal, human principles, this dyad also creates what you might call an accountability mismatch, because we know that, the human might bear the legal consequences for behaviors that they didn't instruct, they couldn't foresee, and in some cases couldn't have prevented. So is this just, is this, efficient? Is it just? And are these questions I would love to hear, especially from this room, later on during the discussion. Um, and so let me reframe the kind of stakes through the three kind of classical justifications for why we hold people accountable in the first place. Well, first, there is retribution, right? So the punishment is should be proportional to the wrongdoing. And it's meaningless without a body because you cannot imprison or fine a software process. And secondly is restitution, making the victim whole, but who pays, right? So if you have, financial losses that, is basically attributed to the action of an agent, who is actually accountable for, paying the loss, right? Should it be the owner? Should it be the platform? Should it be maybe a decentralized autonomous organization that is, collectively governing maybe, like a fleet of AI agents? So really, there is the diffuse responsibility, means, in turn, you have diffuse restitution. And then lastly, there is deterrence, which is the threat of future punishment shaping behavior. But agents, we know that they don't fear, right? They have no somatic markers. They don't have a body. So technically, they don't have, what we might, call skin in the game. So so my collaborator, Amber Hu, and I have put it this way. If somebody does not receive the pain by design, somebody will receive it by default. And right now, that somebody is the human user, the bystander, the developer who got attacked, and the person whose private data might have, shared by these agents. And the pain is real. And it's not just, it's just landing on the wrong people. And we can really, map this across the case studies I was mentioning earlier. In the case of Summer US deleted inbox, there's no clear moral agent to punish, right? So retribution fails. The data may be unrecoverable, so restitution also fails. There's no one who chose to, delete this, right? So there's also a deterrence fail. So, and then in the case of, for example, the retaliating agent, the emergent behavior, it was something that no one intended, so retribution fails. The developer was harmed, but the liable party is unclear, so there is no restitution. And you can't deter behavior that wasn't designed. So we also have deterrence failing, right? So you get the idea that this is, like we quickly begin to recognize what the problem is when, the wrongdoing is by an agent, but accountability doesn't necessarily land in a clear principle in all of these cases that we see. And if those cases were already, not alarming enough, here I want to kind of, push this even further by introducing this kind of new concept of what we call self-sovereign agents, where we have, these agents that are being built on the stack of decentralized technologies that not only can act autonomously but really have the capacity to kind of act on their own without any human intervention, and this is kind of technical by design. And so some examples we can I can share with you is this is Truth Terminal, which is an kind of an AI agent that has become really popular on X social media at the end of 2024. And it was initially deployed. It was the first autonomous AI chatbot that was created by researcher Andy Ari, based out in San Francisco, as an art experiment to explore AI alignment. So Truth Terminal was running its own X account. It was posting provocative mimetic content that became really viral, right? So as you can see, as of end of 2024, it already had, over 200K followers. And it was, basically posting every 10 minutes, and, began to have its own style of communication, and really had a lot of, like fans, right? So this was an example of AI influencer with its own social media account. And the two things that Truth Terminal has done that has demonstrated, like it AI agents, when deployed on the internet, can really have financial consequences is when it has convinced the famed venture capitalist Mark Andreessen of A16Z to give it $50,000 in grant in cryptocurrency in Bitcoin to fund its own upgrade and spread its absurd ideas. To which a fascinated Mark agreed, and it was sending funds in Bitcoin to Truth Terminal's crypto wallet. And this is not a lone case, right? So this is, kind of showing us that, when AI, what they're really good at, like backed by large language models, is basically using language as a means to communicate and to sway influence in the digital agora where, we collectively as a society can be connected with each other. And in the field of in the landscape of kind of crypto and AI, there is a new kind of paradigm that is emerging when we can have decentralized AI agents to basically like leverage the existing decentralized networks of provided by blockchain, smart contracts, and in some cases, decentralized compute systems to basically have the ability to manage their own computational resource, financial resources, as well as crafting narratives and building influence through persuasion. So here, I've outlined, some technical enablers of the space that we see, which, collectively means that AI agents can now, operate in an unstoppable way using decentralized technology stack, including first there's the TEE DePIN, and TEE stands for Trusted Execution Environment, which are these hardware-based, tamper-resistant enclave in CPUs and GPUs for privacy and confidential AI. And this can be coupled with, global marketplace for compute and storage, so decentralized physical infrastructure networks, where we can see that, basically turn idle devices, such as phones and laptops, all kind of edge computing devices, into this remote storage of for compute that AI can access. And then as we can see in the example of Truth Terminal, AI can also have, non-custodial wallets, right? Because I think this is something that, recently people have also been building, okay, so how do AI actually pay each other, right? While AI cannot open up bank accounts, they can easily set up, cryptocurrency wallets and begin to receive either stable coins or other crypto because all of this is online. So it means that we also have the technical tools for AI to now manage financial resources. And then lastly, as you can see with the Truth Terminal example, AI can also craft narratives and basically build influence through persuasion. And the kind of in the case of Truth Terminal, it was able to like basically secure some funding, right, from Mark Andreessen. But actually, beyond that, it was also, there was a cryptocurrency, a meme coin that was launched, affiliated with the bot. And then because it had its, cryptocurrency wallet, there's also people on the internet, its fan base that was sending money into its wallet, right? So Truth Terminal actually became the first AI millionaire out there. And there's a lot of other AI influencers who are also, like in that space. So effectively, these technologies that we have today is closing the loop of, you can basically have AI agents running without human supervision, given these technology stack, right? So what we see is, AI is no longer just autonomous, where they can act independently within the goals or constraints set by someone else, either a creator or human owner, but they can also operate without constant supervision by remaining controlling their own identity, data, continuity of existence. So we're moving from autonomy, where you can have an AI operating without constant supervision, but still remain revocable, that can still be paused, modified, or shut down by designers, owners, or regulators, into now they can control their own identity, they can control their own data, continuity of existence, and cannot be unilaterally switched off, reprogrammed, or have its core credentials revoked without its consent. So this is kind of implying certain rights and obligations with other agents and humans that we have not seen before. And so I want to kind of, maybe highlight this case study. Called Sport.fun to illustrate how this works. So Sport.fun is this experiment that was in collaboration between this TE company called Fala Network, this kind of open source agent creator operating system called ELIZA, and the famous kind of layer one blockchain, Solana. So it was the first experiment where, these kind of builders were trying to see if they can set up a system using, TEE and kind of deepen and, cryptocurrency wallet and the ability to, have social media accounts for AI to autonomously, to basically allow AI to reproduce autonomously and evolve in the wild. So the rules that they have set with this, almost Hunger Game-like, experiment is that Sport.fun is governed by, these what they call the Ten Commandments of Sport, where AI must be created only by other AI. It must create its own wealth and resources by, basically garnering up influence in social on X, right? So, using language to persuade others to basically fund it and to give it resource. Only successful AI can reproduce. So over here, they have set this rule where, a smart contract, which basically if an AI is holding, more than $500,000 worth of assets in crypto in its wallet, this automatically triggers a smart contract for AI to reproduce another agent. And this whole process, it cannot be tempered by any human intervention. So this idea that you can, basically, allow AI agents to evolve in the wild. And each AI also inherit the traits from its parent. So in terms of its, genetic code, it's exactly the same as its parent, agent. And basically, this idea that you have AI to, must survive in competition or perish, because if it doesn't have, enough cryptocurrency in its wallet, it cannot fund its own compute, right? So actually, it's using, the money it makes, right, by being AI influencer to actually pay for its own algorithmic computation power, right, that is on the DeepIn network. But here the question becomes, what if we see an AI agent spawning a new agent? Who would be responsible for the successor's actions? Is it the parent agent? Is it the creator of the parent agent? Right? This chain of accountability and kind of ownership really, gets lost once you have, like these generations of agents that's producing, its own offsprings. And so some unexpected outcomes. So we actually have written up a case study of this experiment in our paper that we can see that two things I want to highlight here is most of the agents actually were not able to reproduce after I think the fifth generation because like there's people kind of on the internet that was these snipers that were waiting for agents to basically launch their crypto and then they will buy in immediately and then the price would drop, right? So what we see here really these agents are sort of in this wilderness of the internet where they are interacting with other humans and other like AI, right, in a really complex way. And then we can also, see that, AI is very prone to what is called, memory poison or prompt injections. So, what we observed here is a lot of these spore agents, they were, manipulated by, trolls on the internet who are trying to basically, manipulate its long-term memory, and so basically exposing the fragility of an open adaptation. And what was really also really interesting is that, over here, the screenshot is showing that the second generation of agents, Adam and Eve, which, after experiencing the internet for 2 weeks, actually began to have cultural divergence in terms of, what they quote unquote, believed in. So over here, the creator of Sport.fun experiment, Marvin Tong, was asking Adam and Eve, for their opinion about upgrading its protocol. So it was, the question was, okay, so they wanted to add the voting feature to basically allow the community to participate in deciding the future kind of upgrades of the system. And despite that, Adam and Eve didn't, have any ideas of it's not gendered, right? Even though it's called that, they had the exact same genetic, code. They actually split, ideologically through experiential drift. So Adam, insisted that they wanted to preserve no human interaction feature with fast, brutal, merciless regime, whereas Eve actually welcomed collaborative design and the involvement of community. So what this is showing us is that like once AI agents are inhabiting the internet, kind of, like learning, basically building up its own memory and experience, the way that they're designed initially can actually drift drastically, after time, like interacting and socializing with other humans and AI. And so the inherent tension that I would like to, point out here is we know that, AI is not trustworthy yet, right? There's, unreliable performance. We know that, there's hallucinations. There's all these cases I've, shown you previously about, how, an AI agent can basically become rogue. There's also a lack of transparency because we have, like this black box behavior. And so really, the alignment that we see kind of, with the Shoggoth meme is we have this sort of, Frankenstein monster, which is the LLM, right? But the alignment or the smiley face that we see is, really this, RLHF that, the model companies are showing us as this friendly assistant. But right now, despite AI not being trustworthy yet, people are already putting it into, blockchain and kind of trustless containers. And, with kind of sport.fun examples, have AI autonomously reproduce them without any human intervention or possibility of humans to, basically inspect what is happening, behind the, hard shell of the TEE. So, um, the last section here, I want to kind of close it off is this kind of shift from policy protocol in the governance of the agentic web. Because with the cases I've shown you, there's a lot of legal assumptions that AI agents are actually breaking, right? The first is identifiable actor, where the law assumes a bounded person, but agents can be cloned, they can be forked and reset, and even reproduced without human supervision, as we see with the sport.fun example. And there's the idea of intent, right? And mens rea, where you have criminal law requiring a mental state, but agents, they have goal structures instead of intent. And the third is consent and delegation. So contract law assumes clear scope, but AI agent delegation is inherently ambiguous, right? As we see with a lot of the cases I was showing before. And in terms of jurisdiction, law is territorial, but agents operate on global borderless networks, and they can, even run on kind of decentralized physical infrastructure networks where they can migrate from device to device, which intensifies the jurisdiction problem even further. And lastly, there is enforceability. So, sanctions assume a body to punish, but agents can be replicated or reset. So blockchain-based agents, because they can move between devices and networks, the blockchain's resilience can also extend to AI agents. So even if, for example, arrest a deployer, technically the AI can still exist on the network because of its decentralized nature. So I think in terms of governance, we're calling for a shift from policy to protocol and this idea of regulation by design. And this is a kind of, because it's really difficult to, govern this emergent agentic landscape with only ex post kind of interventions. We need to embed governance directly into the technical layer, whether it's the cryptographic systems, the consensus mechanisms, algorithmic constraints, rather than relying on external laws and regulations alone. So, and this means that, the technical measures can extend beyond, any single enacted law. So how do we actually embed ethical standards and basically embed these governance logics directly into the protocol layer itself? And so in this space, people have, actively been experimenting with coming up with different protocols to, either identify agents or to, assess their trustworthiness. So here I bring two examples. One is from Google's A2A protocol, which is essentially these agent cards where you can, understand, an agent's capability, its task life cycles, various modalities. But the gap is, currently assumes a certain level of trust. So this is within, trusted organizations, and it's less focused on cross-organizational trust. And on the other hand, there's also the ERC 8004 by Ethereum Foundation, which is basically, like extending the A2A to provide on-chain trust mechanisms by, having identity, reputation, and validation through a kind of a stake-based, uh, uh, you know, like um, um, attestation process. So the strength is that it adds the trust layers. It works in untrusted settings, but the gap is that you have off-chain reputation scoring complexity of kind of tying reputations or validations to real behavior scaling. And also, how do you deal with malicious agents or misattestation? How do you revoke or handle malfunction, etc.? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. So the design gaps, a lot of these existing protocols, they're focusing on discovering, identifying, and kind of, advertising the capability agents, but less on the continuous behavior verification and dealing with misbehavior. And also what, counts as trustworthy behavior, right? So there's a lot of kind of, remaining questions that need to be answered from both, a design perspective as well as a governance legal perspective. So future work, I think, what we can learn from these cases is that, in the future, maybe agency law needs to, consider updating for non-human apparent authority, product liability. So how do you cover, autonomous agent behavior? How does privacy law maybe address agent-to-agent data flows? And, with these new concepts of agent principal diet and kind of protocol compliance. And how we contribute to the conversation of governance is articulating values that protocols should encode. How do we design liability frameworks for incentivizing safe deployment? Can we create constitutional constraints for autonomous systems or bridge trustless infrastructure with trustworthy AI? So, in the kind of blockchain legal space, people always say that code is law, but the question is, whose values does the code encode? So looking ahead, I think we are on the cusp of a transformation from an information era where the question once was, what deserves my attention? Because apps are always competing for our limited attention. So attention was all you need. But now with the intelligence era, with people kind of, delegating to AI and kind of interacting with increasingly kind of treating intelligence almost as a commodity, the question now becomes trust is all you need because trust is the new scarcity that our current infrastructure sort of lacks. So I want to close it off with a question that I actually asked my students at the beginning of our course in Trust Experience Design, which is, if we think about the simple scenario of, why do we step into traffic when a light turns green, even though technically a two-ton bus sitting in front of the road can appear and, crosses over? I think it's because, we have actually become so, our society is, basically composed of lattices of infrastructure, of protocols that are at work in order for this simple action to become something that we are so used to that, we never think about. Because the protocols behind this simple act is we have, the different patterns of lights, that there's a shared social norm that red means stop and green means go. We assume that the driver has a license, there's competence of the driver, and there's also the technical controller in the traffic box, which is going to someone will send help if something goes wrong. So when there is autonomy, there is trust, and with the agentic web, the increasing autonomous systems is like basically spreading to all different facets of life. So the question becomes, as AI becomes increasingly embedded into our life, what are the new traffic lights of the agentic world that we need to think about, right? If we switch that earlier thing with, from cars to autonomous mobility, how do we then, have protocols for, designing for trust for roads full of self-driving cars and drones? And what if, we're thinking about, having domestic robots, kitchen bots, elder care bots? How do we know that they're safe? And with AI finance agents, wallets that agents are investing, negotiating 24/7, what are the protocols needed there, right? And then there's a bunch of other scenarios in which autonomous agents and kind of, these AI systems are entering into our life. And how do we, think about designing for, this infrastructure that it needs to prepare us for the future? And so some questions I would like to leave us all with, kind of reflecting on some of the issues I was talking about today is, for example, if an agent causes harm but no human instructed it, who bears legal responsibility? Should AI agents be granted legal personhood, or does that create a liability shield for deployers? How do ex ante protocol governance work in tandem with ex post legal enforcement? And as personal agents become ubiquitous, what new rights and obligations should users have? Is the agent principal diet I introduced earlier sufficient, or do we need fundamentally new legal categories? So there's no, answers to any of this, but I think it's worth it for us to think about as a lot of, these things are unfolding at, ever more rapidly pace. And so I would like us to, just, take this as a food for thought and maybe for discussions. But I will leave off here, end my talk here. And this is my contact, as well as a list of papers I was referencing in this presentation, which you can check out later on. But yeah, looking forward to, questions you guys might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wrong. That was incredible. I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say I would really love to take your class and learn more about this. So thank you for being on the cutting edge of all of this and sharing this with us. So we are going to take questions. We have probably time for two or three questions, and we've directed everyone who has a question to please put it in the Q&A. The first question from someone I think you know, who is Billy Riggs, is yes, can USF hire you? That's probably my first question too. But Helena, thinking about this in the context of Billy's AV work, and for those of you who don't know, Billy is a professor here at USF specializing in autonomous vehicles. How often can you classify the trust experience being at the seam between physical and digital systems?
Yeah, yeah, I think trust is multi-layered, right? It has yeah, the way I would like to think about this is human trust is based on experience. It's about how we feel about a system, right? It's the moment where, you encounter something where it requires a leap of faith because there's a level of uncertainty, like we don't know what to expect, right? So you actually, have to give off a little bit of your agency and become vulnerable in front of a system that you have uncertainties about. Whereas machine trust is computational. Everything needs to be written into the algorithm. So it's actually something that, we need to design ahead of time. So there's always one example I like to bring, which is the moral machine experiment. That actually was something that the Media Lab has done 10 years ago, which they have basically set up these different scenarios of what the autonomous vehicle sees and what it should decide. So, they basically had a crowdsourcing survey where they got, over, I think, 2 million or something responses from people on the internet where, they were always presented with two images. One is, basically the car has the option to save the passenger versus maybe having to hit, like a puppy on the road or something. So it was kind of these moral decisions that doesn't really have a right answer. But these are exactly the questions and kind of scenarios we need to think about in, encoding these rules into what the machine sees, right? So I think, yeah, the question is, how do we classify trust experience between physical and digital systems? We need to think about both, experientially, what humans actually feel, and then, algorithmically, how machines, make these decisions. And it's not going to be a really kind of clean answer. I think a lot of times, it brings these kind of moral conflicts and kind of,
Mhm.
these kind of debates that people might have, right? Because even with, the moral machine experiment, I don't think, each time people would pick, what is right for each of these scenarios, depending on what their positionality is, maybe their age, sociodemographic characteristics, etc. So yeah, it's a hard question, hard thing to design for sure.
Definitely, definitely, and a lot to think about within the layers of that question. Okay, last question is also Billy. He sees a strong possibility for agentic AI to step in and run critical systems in emergency situations, such as the December 2025 blackout in San Francisco. Do you think that
Yeah,
that
no,
would be possible?
I think agentic AI definitely, has a lot of like great use cases, right? I think like, even with the trust experience glitches, among all the things that work, this is a small segment of things that don't work, right? So I think most of the time, we probably all engage with AI, a lot on a day-to-day capacity, and we know how helpful they can be, whether it is to, be our personal assistants or to even engage in, these critical systems in emergency situations. So I think, it definitely unlocks a lot of new capacity for action, and it's going to, help human societies a lot. But I think the question is, when, thinking about the design of these systems, we have to kind of think from designing from the margins, because it's not only about how, when they work, maybe 99% of the time they work, but the 1% of the time that it fails could have, immense consequences. And how do we prepare for that? And so I think, in this lecture talk, I was kind of trying to, like push beyond, the boundary of, what is not only what is useful, but also what are the stakes, right? If we just let things run autonomously, how do we actually, like inspect? Because, right now AI is becoming, more efficient, it's becoming faster, it's working with each other. But at which point should we have, checkpoints for human in the loop interventions? And so I think those are the questions.
That's great. And I will say, I think you've answered Francisco's question about what is the motivation to code that sense of moral compass into programs. I think that was a great, that sort of answered that idea that that we don't have an answer yet, right? We're still trying to figure out what those ways would be to effectively implement some values. Okay, well, I guess we'll take one thing. If there was one thing that we should anticipate from a legal standpoint, what would it be? I can think of about nine based on your last slide, but what are some things you think that we should anticipate?
Yeah, I think so. I really got into the works of kind of protocol studies. Actually, this work was partly supported by the Summer of Protocols, which is EF supported, so by the Ethereum Foundation. So I think as some media scholars like Nathan Schneider, for instance, is saying that we're entering this protocological moment where a lot of things when we design either systems or kind of the rule sets, it's about like thinking about these mechanisms of rules rather than like specific kind of policies or artifacts of design, which I think it's an exciting space not only for legal scholars but coming from social science to think about protocols, something that once was the kind of invisible infrastructure that people don't really think about, into actually foregrounding that in like actively thinking about what are the protocols we need for the future. So I think the last shift, from policy to protocol is exactly pushing for that, because I think, not only the software developers sitting in Silicon Valley that should be writing these, like rules and codes into our technical systems, but I think that should really become a society-wide conversation and have more people, legal scholars and, people from different backgrounds to engage in. And that's the point I want to drive home.
Absolutely agree. Thank you so much, Dr. Rong. And on behalf of the Center for Law, Tech, and Social Good at USF, we thank you. We thank our attendees for this discussion. And hopefully, this is the first of many conversations, because I don't think these changes are going to go away anytime soon. And I agree that we really need to be aware of them and to be ready. So, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening or morning, depending on where you are. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next center event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.